So we're all done with ratios and rates. So we're going to move on to the next section. This is still chapter 5, but I kind of broke it into 2 different units because it's a little bit different. So we're going to start with writing percents as fractions. The reason why this is in the same unit is because percents are basically ratios out of 100. So let's do the notes together. A percent is a part to whole ratio. If you remember, part to whole is where you're comparing something to a total. In this case, the total is 100. So a percent is a part to whole ratio where the whole, or the denominator, is 100. To write a percent as a fraction, all you do is write it over 100 and simplify. Sometimes the percent is a number that's higher than 100, which is okay. In this case, you're going to get an improper fraction, which we can turn into a mixed number. Okay, so let's try a couple of examples. Do these ones with me. First one says, write 12% as a fraction. So as the direction says, you take your percent, which is 12, and you just write it over 100. Okay, and then the next step is just to simplify it. So I need to think of something I can divide 12 and 100 both by. So they're even. You can always start with 2, but I'm just noticing that 4 goes into both of them. So I'm just going to skip and divide them both by 4. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. 100 divided by 4 is 25. So 12% is the same exact thing as 3/25 in simplest form. All right, let's try another one. Do this one with me. Write 134% as a fraction. So step 1, take your percent and write it over 100. So this is clearly an improper fraction because the numerator is bigger than the denominator. So you can make it a mixed number. So 100 goes into 134 once, and you would have 34 left over out of 100. And now I just have to simplify. So I have to figure out a number I could divide 34 and 100 both by. They're both even numbers, so I'm going to divide them both by 2. So I get 1 and 17/50. 17 is a prime number, so that's going to be your simplest form. So that means 134% is equal to 1 and 17/50. So they're equivalent. They both mean the same exact thing. Okay, so let's scroll down and do the second part. For this next part, sometimes you get percents that are not whole numbers. Sometimes you get a decimal percent. So for this one, it says, if the percent has a decimal in it, still write it over 100. So step 1 is to take your percent, even there's a decimal in it, that's fine. So 12.5 over 100. So step 1 is exactly the same. Take your percent, write it over 100. Now, we can't have a decimal in a fraction. So to get rid of it, you just move your decimal to the right. So it takes one spot to get to the right. So that's going to give me 125. So now you count however many loops it takes to get rid of the decimal point, which is 1, and you add that many zeros to the denominator. So since it took us 1 loop to get it to the right, I'm going to add 1 0 to the denominator. And then I can simplify these. Okay, so I'm going to try to figure out the biggest number I can divide them both by, which I believe is 125. Yep, so I can divide these both by 125. Okay, so when I do that, 125 divided by 125 is 1. 1,000 divided by 125 is 8. So 12.5% is the same thing as 1/8. So step 1 again, you write it over 100. However many loops it takes to get it to the end to make it a whole number, you add that many zeros to the denominator, and you do the same exact thing you did before. Okay, let's try one more thing. So we just took fractions and made percents actually and made them into fractions, and now we're going to go backwards and take fractions and make them into percents. So to make a fraction into a percent, write an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100 because percents are out of 100. Okay, the numerator is equal to the percent. So let's try this example. We have 16/25. I'm just going to write it here so I can write it more like so it looks like a fraction. So we want to make it into a percent. Percents are out of 100, so we want the denominator to be 100. So now we have to figure out what times 25 gives us 100, which is 4. So we multiply the numerator by 4. 16 times 4 is 64. So 64 over 100 equals 64%. Okay? So you have to figure out what you can multiply the denominator by to get 100, and then you multiply the numerator by that. And then the numerator becomes your answer. If it's a mixed number, you can either make it improper first and follow the same steps that we just did here, or you can leave it a mixed number and put the whole number in front of your final answer. I like that option better. So let me show you that option. I think it's way quicker. So 1 17/20. I want the denominator to be 100 because we're trying to make it into a percent. So 20 times 5 gives me 100. So I'm going to do 17 times 5, which is 85. Now, if you're doing it this way and there's a whole number, all you do is put the whole number right in front of your numerator. So 185%. Okay? So if it's a mixed number, you're going to have a percent that's over 100. Okay, so I did 20 times 5 is 100, so 17 times 5 is 85, and then the whole number I just put right in front of it, so 185%. So this is now taking a fraction and making it into a percent. All right, so let's try one of the last few things. This is a big section. Okay, so sometimes you get a situation where the denominator doesn't go into 100. Because not, everything's perfect in real life here. So you're not always going to get a denominator that goes into 100 evenly. So here's what you do in that case. So let's look at this one. 8 and 13. 13 clearly does not go into 100. So what you do is you divide the numerator by the denominator. So that means the numerator has to go on the inside, the denominator has to go on the outside. This is going to give you a decimal answer. I have to add a decimal point and a few zeros, otherwise it's not going to go in. Okay? So 13 does not go into 8. 13 goes into 80. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to try 6. I think it's 5, but we'll try 6. Oh, 6, there we go. So that goes in 6 times, which is 78. Subtract, I get 2. Bring down the 0. 13 goes into 20 once. Okay, subtract, I get 7. Bring down a 0. This goes in 5 times, which is 65. Subtract, I get 5. Now, this one seems to be going on for quite some time. You can stop as soon as you have 3 numbers up here. So as soon as we have 3, which we do, you can stop. So 0.615. Again, I'm only doing long division because the denominator doesn't go into 100. So now I just move the decimal point 2 spots to the right. So 1, 2. So 61.5% would be my final answer. So that means 8/13 is equivalent to 61.5%. They both mean the same exact thing. All right, so again, you're only doing this long division if the denominator doesn't go into 100 evenly. So you put the numerator on the inside, the denominator on the outside. You're going to get a decimal. If it goes on forever, you could stop after 3 numbers, and then you move it 2 spots to the right. Okay, I know I've said this for like a bunch of times, but I swear this is the last part of this. This is a huge section. There's like a bunch of stuff in it, but this is the last part. So when finding a percent, so this is a little bit different. It says 9 is what percent of 16? So they want to know what percent does this give you. So when finding the percent of a number, the answer is already given to you along with the number you were finding the percent of. So what you do is you write the answer as a fraction and set it equal to x over 100. So I'm going to do 9 over 16, the 2 numbers that they gave us. So 9 is what percent of 16? And then I'm going to put x over 100 over here. And there's 2 ways to do this. You could figure out how many times 16 goes into 100, but it doesn't go in evenly. So we can do the long division like we just did before. So you could do 9 divided by 16. Add a decimal point because you're going to get a decimal answer. So I'm just going to do that on my calculator because I'm running out of time here. So I get 0.5625. Okay, and then I can move the decimal, oh, that's not a 5. And then I can move the decimal 2 spots to the right and get my answer. So 56.5%. Or another way that you might like better, this is another option, is you can multiply across. So you could do 9 times 100, which is 900, and then divide that by the number you haven't used yet, which in this case is 16, and you would get the same exact answer. So 900 divided by 16 gives me the same thing, 56.5%, and that gives you the answer without having to move the decimal. Okay, so it's totally up to you. But the setup is to take these 2 numbers and write them as a fraction, and then you want to get it equal to 100. If it goes into 100, you could just multiply across. If it doesn't, you have 2 options. You could do long division or cross multiply and divide.